This is the Edge Pro Apex Knife Sharpener, and I'm going to go through the instructions with you. First thing, take the machine out of the case, take out the arm, take out the sharpener, and the first thing I did was I wet the towel, wrung it out really good so it's just damp. Just put a little water on the table. You don't want too much. If you get too much water under the suction cups, they'll slide around. So you want them to stick really solid. Lay your stones out. And then if you're doing like a brand new knife and you don't want to scratch it, you want to put some painter's tape on the end of the table, and all the machines we ship come with painter's tape on the table. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is set the knife guide. I'll do that before I put the stone on him so you can see it better. Most knives are set at the narrowest part of the knife. You put the tip at this corner of the machine, you bring the knife guide up until the other corner just covers. So what I'm after is, I want as much of the knife on the machine as possible, but I don't want to expose the machine underneath the knife. You take the arm out of the case, take the rubber band off, and put the end opposite the end of the tip on it into the machine. But if it winds up looking like that, it's in upside down. You want the arm going down the center of the machine. So to flip it over, you turn it over to the opposite side of the pivot like that, and put it back in the machine. Now the two halves of the pivot are lined up, and the rod is going down the center of the machine. And then lock the pivot into the back of the machine. Now there's indicator marks on the front of the pivot. They're colored marks. They're 3 degrees apart. Red is 15 degrees. So you can always figure out where you're at if you can remember red's 15. And it'll tell you in the manual what angles are used for what knives. So I'm doing a chef's knife, and you can pretty much do all your kitchen knives at 18 degrees. So I'm going to do one more thing I want to show you about the pivot. When it's set correctly, just like that, the green mark, the bottom of the green mark is lined up with the top of the pivot. We're starting with a 220 stone, and you can sharpen just about every dull knife starting with a 220. The only thing you need a 120 for is something that's in severely bad shape or something you're going to reprofile, which we'll go over later. So I'm starting at the back of the knife, using a forward stroke to cut and glide on the back stroke. So it looks just like that. Go all the way to the stop, and all the way to the stop on this side. Now these stops on this machine are set up so that there's no way you can get your hand in contact with that sharp edge. This has a very large catch on it. And it's almost impossible for you to get your hand over the knife. But even if you could, you have a second stop on the pivot, and if anybody were to fall into you from behind really fast, the only thing that's holding the knife against the knife guide is the pressure you're keeping here. So the second you let go of that, the knife goes away. So we're going to sharpen down the blade. If you have trouble moving the blade at the same time you're sharpening, make a few strokes, slide the knife, make a few strokes, slide the knife. When you get to the tip, if you have trouble controlling the stone at the tip, you can make strokes off the tip like that. I'll switch into the opposite side. So you sharpen until you get a burr on the knife, which I already have, but this knife was in very good shape. It's going to take you much longer to do every single operation I do because I want to go through it quickly with the video. The next thing I'm going to do is change down to the 600 stone. And you'll notice I'm jumping over the 320. You can go through that step if you like, but this is really a pretty good shortcut. So I wet the stone, wipe it off, and it's going to take me about 2 passes to remove all of the scratches from the 220 and bring the level of the edge up to 600, which is a very nice edge for your kitchen knives. So now you can feel the burr again, and as the burr gets smaller, as the stones get higher in grit, it gets harder to feel it. A lot of people can't feel the 320 grit. It's pretty fine, but it's there. And the burr always forms on the opposite side of the stone. So if I'm sharpening on this side, the burr is forming on this side. So I just draw my finger across to feel that it's there. And if you have a burr in some spots of the knife and not others, you just work on that spot that doesn't have a burr. And then just lightly run over the rest of the blade until you've got the burr down the full length of the blade, which I have. So now to remove the burr, I'm going to dry my stone off, and I'm going to make a pass with only one stroke through each area of the blade and with no pressure at all. I'm just letting this float. And as you're holding the knife, you will notice when you're learning, you will be pushing down on the blade. You don't need to do that. But when you're learning, it takes at least 10 or 15 knives before you can get this hand to relax. You can see it takes nothing to hold the knife there. It just stays there. It's pinned to the table by the stone. So after you get the knife to, after you start to get this hand to relax, you just let the heel rest on the heel of your hand so that you can keep the knife still at the tip. Now one more thing I want to go over here. When you're setting up, if your counter at home is textured, this will not stick to it. So there's a couple alternatives. If you have a stone straightening kit, you can use the glass, and it's got a rubber ring around it, so it'll sit still. So you can just stick the machine to that. It works perfect. And if you don't have this, you can also use a glass baking dish and then just put a wet cloth under the baking dish so it doesn't slide around. Then a lot of people want to use these in their shops on their wooden benches. And if you don't want to move the machine around, you can take the suction cups off, take a piece of wood like this, mark where the suction cups would hit, mark the holes, drill 2 holes in there, take the suction cups off, use 2 number 8 sheet metal screws, screw this to the board, clamp it to your bench, and then you can just leave it there, and it's very solid. Now we're going to use a ceramic to finish the edge. And I just need to use an angle that's more than I sharpened at. So I sharpened at 18 degrees. This is a 20-degree angle, and that'll give you some idea. You can just take a protractor and cut a piece of cardboard so you can see the angle. But it's not really angle sensitive. I can use quite a bit more angle, and it still works absolutely perfect. And it should just shred paper, just like that.